service eating establishments. And what we can see is, as you would expect, we knew everything really dropped in April. And slowly but surely, everything is starting to edge upwards and improve, but it's still well below where we were in December of 2019. And then there was some work that was done by the Eastern Ontario Leadership Council, and that looked at between February and April of 2020. It was estimated that COVID-19 reduced the Eastern Ontario gross domestic product by about $1.8 billion and has reduced employment by the equivalent of 64,000 full-time jobs. And Kawartha Lakes is the most western of the Eastern Ontario municipalities. We also conducted, as you know, a business survey of our own businesses at the end of May and the beginning of June this year. And what we found at that point in time was 21% of our businesses were not operating. 57 of them had indicated that they had decreased in their own business. 10% had increased, and 12% had had no change in their business. So our businesses were significantly affected, as we know. Now, the Workforce Development Board has contracted with the Conference Board of Canada to produce some statistics for us, a forecasting of our local economy. They did it of the entire workforce development area, which is Haliburton, us, Peterborough, and Northumberland. And then this is our data. So when you look at what happened 2019 versus 2020 in these industry sectors, what we really saw was those that are in tourism significantly affected. The yellow is employment, the purple is GDP. Interestingly, those that are essential services or governments of some kind were the least impacted. This next figure, again from the Conference Board of Canada data, is showing us 2020 versus what they're thinking is going to happen by 2021. And we're really seeing a flip and a recovery in some of those tourism areas, and pretty much a recovery across the board, even though it may be small. They've also looked at a 5-year outlook for employment and GDP in Kawartha Lakes. So we're looking 2019, which is pre-pandemic, to 2024 post-pandemic. And the interesting piece here is that most of our industries are expected to recover by, and remember that this is a forecast, but what this is suggesting to us is that employment may not necessarily be following the same increase that we will see in GDP as these industries recover. And as you can see across the board, it varies. So local economic development is about creating conditions to support businesses, jobs, and income growth. That's our role. It's the role of business is to do business, to create the jobs, to create the revenues and the economic growth within the business. So Tom is going to touch on transformational economies, but to start that discussion, just to think about it in our context, there is a lot of discussion around, amongst economists and economic organizations around the world, which is starting to talk about rebuilding economies that are smarter, greener, and fairer than the economy that we left behind in 2019. And we've got a lot of data that we can pull locally, and as staff we've been looking at that looks at if we're going to could intentionally rebuild a smarter economy, what that means for broadband technology, adoption, working from home, inclusiveness, and talent, around green, how we adapt technology, how practices might influence climate change, and fair, rebuilding a fair economy, looking at what we know about childcare, the living wage, the cost of living and housing in our community. And I think one of the things that we have seen in this pandemic is that it's shone a light on the areas where we were not using technology very well, or we had gaps in our technology coverage. It's shone a huge light on the ability to be green and change our practices in a way that impacts our environment less. And that there were certain demographics that were significantly impacted more than others in the economic crisis that came out of the pandemic. We also, just to frame your discussion, we have local strategic plans that are actually really well positioned to help shape the directions going forwards. The Economic Development Strategic Plan has 5 goals that is really focused on people and ground up endogenous growth within a community, of strengthening existing business sectors, working with business leaders and our businesses, and helping to grow strong, stable businesses, and attracting and retaining talent that we need in our community. And particularly, we've seen a huge shift in working from home. And for some of us, myself included, that really excites me, in the thought of a reduction in the retail leakage of dollars outside of our community, as more of our people are working from home and potentially shopping locally while they're at home and not in another community on their way to or from work. And the Kawartha Lakes Strategic Plan is also in existence. Council adopted this plan very recently, and it speaks to a lot of the areas that we've been talking about around healthy environment, exceptional quality of life, a vibrant and growing economy, and good government. So I think that this is to say that we have some really good bones in the strategies that we've put in place already that might help frame the discussion going forward around how we rebuild our economy. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate that. Give us a bit of an overview on Kawartha Lakes businesses, some background. Questions, discussion. Anybody have any questions for Rebecca? Kathleen, go ahead.
Okay, I have a question because I know you mentioned that maybe people will be shopping locally. What I see is the Amazon trucks everywhere because people are staying home. So it seems like Amazon is doing very, very well, and the local shops, not quite so much. I know some of the ones that have adopted online shopping, like Bigley's, have done very well with the new online website. So I think it's getting these businesses up to date with their online stuff. I think that's key for them. I know myself with the social media, it's really helped as well. We don't do a lot of online because I don't need to do it because we're in person. But yeah, I think that's the thing is getting people to purchase instead of from Amazon, from the local shops, even if they are doing it online. Because a lot of people don't want to go out. Once they're at home, they kind of want to stay at home.
Rebecca, you want to add to that?
Yes, and actually Tom and I have had a lot of discussions on this, and I'm sure he will love to touch on this. One of our roles in municipal local economic development, which is the city, is all of the business organizations that support, is helping our businesses transition to online platforms. So the Digital Main Street program that we have running in the city, the Shop Here platform for helping businesses get onto their online transactions going. There's a couple of other locally developed technology platforms that businesses can leverage. Our role really is to help these businesses know what's available. They need to jump on them because yes, they absolutely need to be there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
If I could, yeah. I think we've seen this in Peterborough too. The small businesses that took up the opportunity to go online quickly have been able to recover more business than others. I still think there's a group in the population, not just the business community, that believes this online stuff at the local level is just going to be a temporary change, and we'll just go back to the regular business when everything comes back to normal. We're not going back to normal, the old stuff. So, this is the creative destruction side that I've talked about. It's those who believe that we're going to go back to where it was before will fail. And those who are taking up the opportunity to be creative about the way they go about doing their business and how they serve their clients will be the ones who will succeed. So it's going to be a tough time, but anything that can be done to encourage businesses to realize that there is an element to virtually every business in an online environment, that connection to the potential client or the potential customer is going to be an online relationship. That's the way we have to encourage businesses to go.
Okay, thank you. So Rebecca, so, you know, one of the things I've struggled with from an economic recovery perspective is, you know, till we know what businesses are struggling and where our potential lies in the future, how do we know where to focus our efforts on recovery? And, you know, kind of one of the reasons we asked for this presentation was, you know, to sort of break down Kawartha Lakes industry and say, you know, what part of our economy is doing okay, you know, that maybe wasn't affected as much as others, and where, you know, when I go back to slide 16, Kawartha Lakes businesses not operating 21%, Kawartha Lakes businesses that have decreased 57%, you know, I guess, you know, what are those businesses? What is that economy that is taking the biggest hit, that if we're trying to come up with a way to recover, should we be focusing our attention on a specific part of our economy? Is there other parts that are doing quite well? You know, we can't just sort of throw it out there and, oh, we need more people. We need more people to come to our community. That's going to fix our economy. It's so much more diverse than that. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, you know, where is the most potential? As Tom says, we're not going to go back to the way it was before. So where do you see the most potential in the future for our economy to, you know, whether we're investing in it or whether we're focusing in it from a marketing perspective, where do you see the most potential out of sort of all this a lot of information you gave us moving forward? Any comments on that?
I'll give my thoughts and then maybe Tom can give his, if that's okay. We know that tourism was really hard hit at the beginning and is slowly rebounding, and we'll put retail into that as well. I think that is fundamentally important. We also have a small business community where we have a lot of small businesses that don't have employees, and there are some minimum standards like this technology discussion that if we can help businesses get their minimum standards up, then we will be supporting a heck of a lot of businesses across a whole number of sectors. There's also a discussion around the reshoring or the onshoring, the localization of supply chains. And I wonder if there is, as I think we're still in sort of a percolating stage as to where the economy is going. So it's pretty tricky maybe right now to pick industries, but on that manufacturing, supply, transportation and warehousing side, there might actually be some movement there all around the supply chain. As businesses, we're starting to hear talk of people wanting to move out of urban areas into rural areas and take their businesses there, and technology actually opens up that platform for us. So if we are able to capture some of those businesses in Kawartha Lakes and help our established industry there start rounding out their supply chains, that might be a really interesting area to look at. And then as people work from home, I actually think that's a huge key for us. The more that we have people working from home and the less of that 44% that are commuting out of the community, likely to higher paying jobs, then the more potential we have to retain some of those retail dollars and recirculate that within our community.
Okay,
I think it probably requires more discussion, but that would be my starting.
Yep. Tom, did you have anything to add to that?
If I could just, given the nature of the employment in the city, I think construction is the most likely thing early on. It can create jobs for a blue collar labor force, and it can create living conditions for people who can leave the city and still be able to be an hour away from downtown and combine that work and lifestyle piece. I think it's precarious to go in and pick very specific things, but I think at this point, you need to look at forces, where are opportunities to expand employment and therefore demand incomes in the community. That's the short term. So I think construction, getting some things going in terms of creating places for people to live, and a more diverse group that actually doesn't play to the retired group, plays to the working class, let's say mid-career professionals. And then I would do that. There's a timing problem here. You're not going to jump ahead 2 or 3 years to having the conditions to attract more labor, or more people. But in the meantime, you need to put together the things, put in place those things that will attract them. So I think early on construction, get the development going. We have had discussions about speeding up the development process. Get that going, get construction going, create some jobs, put some income in the community, and create living conditions to attract other people.
Awesome, thank you. Pat O'Reilly, you had a question. Go ahead, Pat.
My first was a general question that basically you asked, Annie, is around the 57% and the key issues that we should be talking about. Just further to Tom's point, when you was there a reason why you looked at the window till 2024? I know you probably had to pick a date, but is it that 5-year window, or would it be 2022 or 27, or what was the reason for that, Rebecca?
That was a time frame that was chosen to ask the Conference Board of Canada to forecast out to. So we often look at 5-year trends when we see data, because it gives enough time. It's still short term, but it gives enough time to see some change.
Thank you.
Okay.
But
Further,
a 5-year window.
Yep.
Given where we are right now, the blinds are closed. We can't see out that window right now. We used to think we could, but I think the blinds are closed right now. We don't know where we're going to be at, let alone a year from now. We just hope that there's going to be I think the best case scenario is a gradual increase with some blips along the way. That's as good as it gets.
thank you. Kathleen, go ahead.
I'll agree with Tom that construction is key. I know that the real estate, they don't have any homes on the market right now because things are they're going quickly. I know from customers of mine that they've decided to move up, and these are, people in their 40s, 30s, 40s. Actually, we're having a group of younger people now moving up, late 20s, early 30s, who've decided to leave the city and move up here for a different lifestyle. I also, tourism, my sales and everyone else's sales in Bob Cajun are very similar to last year. And that's with the pandemic. So, the boat sales have gone through the roof, ATV sales, all the trails are busy, all of these things. This is a key. And, it might not be full-time employment yet, but I have 30 people that work for me, and, 5 are full-time and the rest are students. It's giving student jobs. One of the biggest problems are we don't have a labor force. That's a big problem. And if you speak to BCCS or anything else, you'll see that there's positions available and there's nobody to fill them, especially now with the CERB. Let's hope that changes, but people don't want to work necessarily. It's unfortunate.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions on the presentation? If not, we'll move on to Tom's presentation.
Okay.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate that very much. We'll move down to item 5.2, which is prospects for growth. We took a crack at it at our last meeting, but we'll take another crack at it. Tom, if you want to walk us through that presentation again. I think it marries up nicely with what Rebecca's put out first. So I'll turn it over to you. Go ahead.
Can everyone see that?
We can, yeah.
Okay. Good. I think that will do it. I tried to put it all up, but this is where I'll keep it with this. So I did get to begin this last time, and so the early part of it I'll run through. But again, just to put it in context, this is not just crystal balling what's going on. This is based on a kind of body of work around economic growth that's been developed over the last 30 years that very much looks at the role of technology and how technology, different regimes of technology have a lasting effect. And then you get these shifts in technological change and the potential for economic growth that comes with it. So that's where we are. Otherwise, I'll make some observations about what I see going on. Again, our recovery is going to be driven by demand, not supply. We have the ability to produce a lot more than we produce now. So we're actually, when you look at the resources required in production, we're underutilizing them. So there's a lot of labor available. There are some issues with the labor available for the jobs we want done, but there's a lot of labor available. Unemployment is very high. There's technology sitting idle. There are raw materials available. We have no production problem. We have a demand problem. So production is only going to come back when there's demand that drives it. So we have to keep that in mind. That's why I said I think there should be something done that will help us get people to work, get money in the economy, and push some demand into the local economy that will help us with the recovery. So, and on a technical point, this idea of going back to where we were before the pandemic, it's actually technically not possible, or it's because what we've done is we've learned something between the beginning of the pandemic and now about the way we will do business in the future, which means we're not going, if we just pretend it all was an aberration and it all went away, that doesn't make any sense at all, right? So we have learned that we can do business differently, we can deliver government services differently, we can deliver education differently, maybe not to the extent we're doing it now, but it will change the way we do things. So there is no place to go back to. And you know, your odds of getting that right are worse than winning the lotto match right. So we will be interacting with the technology differently in the future than we are now.
Tom, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 minute. I'm just going to ask everybody if you'll put your microphones on mute, please. We're getting a lot of background noise and having trouble hearing Tom, please. Thank you.
Thanks. Here's it's a little wordy, but here's an observation that I think, and I think the discussion today is getting us over this, is that we've been firefighting. Every day we come, we have an issue to resolve. We get all the information we can, we resolve the issue, we move on to the next issue. And we believe that because we make these little micro decisions and we're doing them in an informed way, that somehow they're all going to add up to be something that works or pushes us off in the right direction. That falls into what's generally called the fallacy of composition, that the whole is equal to the sum of its parts. In fact, it could be smaller or larger, but micro units don't add up into macro results. And the way we've traditionally done it is we start with strategies, we move to tactics, and then we do operations. For the last 6 months or so, we've been doing operations, and we look at all the little things we've done and they say, is there any indication of what direction we're taking in this? Like looking for tactics out of operations. And then when we see that we've got some tactics coming, we start to say, well, does this say something about a strategic direction? Recognizing that, I think this discussion is really important, and what Rebecca did earlier, is pushing us back to thinking strategically again, and then looking for the tactics and operations that will come from it. So that's a natural, we had to put the fires out. but now we have to go back to strategic direction that has either fundamentally changed or has been turned a little because of our experience with COVID. Other lessons here, business and government move very quickly to adopt the technology, which is, I think it's an amazing comment on the technology. Can you, Zoom had to be prepared to take on millions of more meetings than it had in January. They had the technological capacity and the foresight to put in place the scalability of their operation that enabled them to be able to serve meetings. Obviously, we had some problems in the last meeting. That's not going to be perfect. But it's amazing that the technology has been able to step up to this new level of adoption. And certainly our education has changed, and it will never go back to the way we have traditionally done classrooms, certainly not in post-secondary education. There will be fundamental changes in the way we deliver education. And we were plodding along very carefully, be sure we got it perfect in the use of the technology. And then suddenly it's like, forget perfect. We got to get this right, but not perfect. And let's move along and learn along the way. So there are going to be changes in the way we work. They're coming along on a daily basis. I had a friend who works in a successful startup in Kitchener-Waterloo, a former student, very successful at a vice president level. The CEO told all the senior management that they never have to come back to work again, ever. So, and he's grew up in Ennismore. He and his wife are thinking about moving here, and if he needs to, he will have to learn how to network differently, work differently, manage differently, but he's prepared to do it, and they've got the technology to do it. And so, as I mentioned before, we've come to this point through necessity and ingenuity, which is a good thing because we've talked about innovation for a long, long time, but we haven't been very innovative. And then suddenly, when we're given the necessity of changing and being innovative, we find ingenious ways to do things that we in a different way. And so that's a really good indication that we do have the potential to be innovative if we're pressed to do it. So, and as we spoke about businesses adapting or not adapting to these changes, there will be, the rewards will go to those who, of the growth in the future, have been able to select what they do and be creative with it and give up other things that they do, not just additively add new innovative pieces on top of what's being done, but find ways to be creative, innovative, and give up some of the things that were done before. They're the ones that will really succeed. And that creative destruction terminology has been around since just after the Great Depression. So 1929 to 1939 with Joseph Schumpeter out of Harvard. And oddly enough, it seems to be talked about a lot more these days. And we are going to go through the creative destruction phase. So as ruthless as it sounds, there are going to be organizations that simply won't survive this because of the lack of innovation or a change in the marketplace or their inability to find ways forward. So we get right down to where economic growth really comes from. And this is, again, quite an academic field that I've been involved in for 25 years. Growth tends to be driven in the beginning with a technological change. And when that technological change comes and it has the ability to be transformative, that it fundamentally changes the way you do business, the way you live. Simple examples in the family, the refrigerator fundamentally changed how families were organized and household appliances in general. And that actually freed up household labor to contribute to the labor market rather than household labor. So, but what it took was a complementary change in the social institution. That is the organization of the family had to change to get the benefits that came from refrigerators. The automobile is a fundamental technological change that changed the way we live. And if we didn't adopt a change in the way we travel, the effect of the automobile would not have been there. It also changed the way our view of the relationship between business and government, because government at the beginning of the automotive transformation were the ones responsible for building the roads, not the car companies. Car companies need roads to sell cars, and they were provided by the public sector. And they still are provided by the public sector. So there's a new institutional change in the role of government that came with a new technological change. So it's when you combine technological change with changes in the way we behave in business, in government, in our households, in education, then we get a transformation, and that's transformational growth. So you're going from one particular phase where a common technology applied to a new phase of economic activity that is fundamentally shifted by the technological change and the ability of society to adapt to that. If you don't adapt, the benefits of technology don't occur. We've looked at this approach in many different countries around the world. We have found no examples of economic growth coming out of technological change where the institutions, the way government works, the way business does business, the way the household is structured, if that doesn't change, the technology does not have an effect. So we're in a technological transformation. We're trying to figure out how we can adapt. And I think right now we're doing pretty well. I mean, we are seeing, like the businesses who have adopted online business in the local community, able to, in effect, substitute for the imports that are coming in every day from Amazon. And that's a reality of business in the future. And so we need to do that. And it's going to be our willingness to change our social institutions, and including the role of government. And so you combine transformational growth and creative destruction. And just to add one little twist to it, we want to get out of this vicious cycle we're in, where we're still trembling to get out of the hole that's been dug for us economically, or the results of what, and we need to get into a virtuous cycle that will be at the heart of it being demand, but it's going to be how we adopt the technology and how we adapt to it that will determine how we get out of this, turn the decline around from a vicious cycle to a virtuous cycle. In terms of government, I think that we can appeal to some economic history on this. Clearly, all municipalities are struggling with their financial side. All provinces are, the federal government is, everyone is doing this, and we're trying to keep the economy afloat by injecting some demand into the economy, which we've been reasonably successful at doing. So when it comes down to it, governments can do three things. They can cut spending, they can increase taxes, or they can invest in growth, which means some difficult times because you have to spend and cut at the same time. And economic history has taught us that the only one of these three that works is investing in growth. If you want out of, we can actually appeal to the early stages of the Depression or how not to do it. And what they did is cut spending and increase taxes. And it was a disaster from 1929 into the beginning of the New Deal that R.B. Bennett and in Canada and Herbert Hoover in the United States were economic disasters at the beginning of the Depression. So we have to look at investing, but again, investing in those things so it will help with the transformation and the economy that we want to go to, accepting the fact that technology is going to drive it, and the impact on us will be related to how well we adapt to the new technology. We want out of the vicious cycle and into the virtuous cycle. And so the tough decisions to be made, but we need to find the areas where we can invest, where the technology is going to help drive the growth. And say in the construction that I brought up, the homes that will need to be built and the buildings for businesses that need to be built have to have in mind that they must have high-speed internet ability, or the business and the people going there won't come and won't thrive. So again, the technology is underlying this. So that's my bit about transformational growth and the potential for economic growth. I think we're in a pretty good position where just the fact that we're talking about transformations and not going back to where the economy was before is a big step toward beginning the recovery. That's it for me.
Thanks, Tom. If you can just take that off the screen, I can get everybody back. That was a great presentation. Lots to think about. Questions, comments, discussion? Chris, go ahead.
So we've seen great increases in, as Kathleen Seymour-Fagan was saying, the sort of tourism industry really flourishing because of the people not being able to fly to Europe or down to the States or wherever, that they're tending to travel more locally and spend money locally. I just had a 2-week holiday and I spent some time in Lake Huron and Bruce Peninsula just because I'd never been there, and I thought, well, I'd see something new in my own part of the world. So, you know, once the pandemic has passed, you talk about, I mean, you could say that there's been a transformational change in the way people travel and the way they're spending their money, doing things more locally. But once the pandemic changes or passes and people are able to start flying again and able to start traveling further afield, you know, how does that equate with the, you know, the transformation in that we're seeing now?
Well, a couple of things. You going to Huron, you probably looked something up online to find out where you were going to go. We probably have to be better at that in terms of our regional tourism, because that's, you know, the international tourism got it 15 years ago. If you're going to attract Canadians to the Caribbean, you better have a really strong online presence to be able to encourage them to do that. We haven't done the same in our, to the degree that they did. And they're small economies. I mean, but many of them are more sophisticated technologically than we are. So, that's the thing. We have to look at tourism as an opportunity for our businesses to attract different clients with the technology. So they have to change their business model. That number one thing. That's number one. Number two is, we're not going to suddenly jump back to a whole bunch, jamming a bunch of people into an airplane. That's not going to happen quickly. And the one thing that our affluent consumers are known for is what's called habit persistence. If people get used to going to the Bruce Peninsula on holidays, the probability of them going back there is going to be pretty great if we can continue to develop the business models. So obviously we're going to change what we're doing, but as travel, but that's why we're seeing, you know, ATVs and, you know, boats and all of that, very difficult to find and buy because people are finding new ways to do things at home. And I think there's going to be some habit persistence. They're spending a lot of money renovating their places. They're probably not going to say, well, let's go to the Cayman Islands for actually a lot of Canadians went there in the summer. They're probably not going to do that as often in the future. But we've got to change our business model.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments for Tom? Councillor O'Reilly, go ahead.
Oh, you're on mute.
You have to take your mute off, Pat.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I was just watching on the news last night on the Peterborough News, and they said Northumberland is winding up their economic cost recovery force. And you have 5 or 6 recommendations, and one of the recommendations or one of the suggestions was to encourage apprenticeships. So I just wonder if you'd have a comment on that. Is that the role of a municipality, or is that something you're familiar with at the college, or would you comment on that?
Yeah, well, apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships are programs that the college runs. We have Fleming now has we have brought back our apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship students to get the hands-on training that they require because of the COVID shutdown. So that's very big, and there's quite a bit of money. It's called SAO, Skills Advance Ontario, that are funding these apprenticeship developments, and there's room for increasing that, and we can do that. So really, the college, including Frost Campus, of course, in Lindsay, can be a partner in the development of apprenticeships. Given what the work I'm doing with EORN related to the broadband proposal, all indications are that there's going to be a requirement, a technical requirement for things like optical fiber splicing that we just don't have enough people to do when you're talking about a very large project, and that gets optical fiber to every organization. That will be done in a training proposal, very much like apprenticeships. So yes, we do need apprenticeship programs, and we need more of them, and we need to get people into the apprenticeships or the trades that are going to be needed in the future. Yes.
Just further to that, Tom, what role do you see the municipality, or how do you see the municipality participating in that?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for the municipality to redefine its relationship with the college. Okay. And whether that can be done in Lindsay, we don't have enough space in Peterborough to be able to deliver the apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeships that we do, given our new space constraints. Our apprenticeship classes are half the size they used to be because of physical distancing. We need more space, and you can do that temporarily. At the Sutherland campus in Peterborough, Fleming has apprenticeship studios, labs at the airport with there are many businesses at the airport, but the airport, it's only, I don't know, 3 kilometers south of the college main building. And we have classes going on there for apprenticeships. There isn't any reason why some locations in Lindsay could be developed to deliver some apprenticeship. So I think that that relationship, I'm happy to help facilitate that relationship between the municipality and the college to expand, to look more at apprenticeships. I'm all for it.
Awesome, thank you. So I got a couple questions, Tom. One of the things that jumped out at me in your presentation was the creative destruction, where some things we have been doing must be left behind for the sake of creating new economic opportunities. And I keep trying to relate that to the municipal business model that we have. No longer can government or business be continually additive, keep all this currently done and add more to what exists. From a municipal perspective, that's, I would say, constantly one of our challenges. We look at what do we offer to our residents as services. This is what it costs. This is our levels of service. Then we say, well, we want to get more into culture, arts and culture. We want to create that economy, creative economy, but we don't want to give anything up to do it, right? So we start adding to it, and we need more money in the budget. So we got to increase taxes. We have residents that, God forbid, if you took a service away or you changed the way it was delivered, we're going to hear about it. Our council's going to hear about it because, we're used to doing things a certain way. And, it's a challenge. And I totally agree with that, that we need to change, and we need to find, even from a economic perspective, we always need to look at finding better ways to deliver those services. But as we create that new economy in the future, we're going to have to do some different things. And I'm just wondering if you had a comment on, how do we leave some of that other stuff behind, or what used to be important? Maybe it's, a walk-in service center that we used to have 8 of them in the municipality. Now we have 5. Do we need 5? Can we do away with one central location where people don't need to walk in anymore? They're finding, this pandemic has forced people, in your words, to go online and get their services, even if they don't like doing it. So, there's different ways we can change our business, but there's always that resistance to change. And I just wondered if you have a comment on that, because that's a challenge for municipalities and then even for some businesses.
No doubt about it. Oh, yeah. And it really is unreasonable to think that municipal government has the capacity to increase the services they provide, particularly with new services, when you have to find out how to do it well. You're not going to do it perfectly to begin with, and not have taxes go up. I think the political discussion needs to be, if you don't want taxes to go up, but you want these, and we do know that there are services or activities that the government needs to undertake, and we agree that that needs to be undertaken, then to not have taxes go up, how do you want to reorganize what we do at the other end? The old services, the old ways of doing it. Now, very often it means finding a way to partner somehow with the private sector who can deliver it differently, or that very often is the case. But it really is unreasonable to think that government has the ability to increase their productivity so much so quickly without raising taxes and continue to deliver high levels of service. It's just not. And the notion that governments are not productive or have increases in productivity is simply not true in the data. So in terms of innovation, governments have been pretty innovative, and historically governments have been innovative. There's some really interesting international comparisons around an innovation index, and the Canadian public sector doesn't do so well relative to other, but the Canadian public sector does pretty well. So those decisions are obviously political decisions, but it has to be put in the context of, if there are things that we need to do economic growth, we need to do them, and there's general agreement, then we have to have the discussion about what aren't we going to do. We're not good at that. And just a final comment.
We're not good at that at all. We're terrible at that.
No, we're terrible at that.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, a reflection of an affluent society. And if you look at my generation, my parents' generation versus my generation, my parents gave up a lot. They were born around the First World War. And they were 29 years old before they were free of war and depression. These were people who were driven by change, and they left the old things that used to be done behind to take on new things that they knew public had to invest in, like universal public health care, like expanding the college and university systems in Ontario, all of those things. These had to be done. And the easiest way to do those things is to have the economy grow so that you have more money to be able to do them. But in the end, there have to be things you leave behind. You can't say when the automobile came along, the blacksmiths have been the core of our community. We need to do whatever we can to keep the blacksmiths because they've been around forever. And if we need to keep them, we need to subsidize them somehow because they're so important. Apparently that wasn't the case.
Okay.
You actually made that argument.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And that's good. And second point I had, and I want to go back to your comment, because I don't want to hog the whole conversation here, but go back to your comment with Chris, where, you go on a trip and we keep talking about our economy moving forward. And, we've got people who are staying closer to home, and maybe they're coming up here and visiting day trips because they're not doing, the airplane or the south or over to Europe right now. So how do we keep them coming back? And when we've got those different facets of economic development, like, marketing and stuff to get people to come up here. But, sometimes don't you think sometimes we lose sight of, it's like having somebody come here and saying, what do we have to do when they come here to make sure that they want to come back? Like what kind of experience do we want to give them so that they go, you know what, that was so much fun. I don't really want to go anywhere else. I mean, when I go to a good restaurant and I have a really good meal, I will tend to go back to that restaurant because I had a good experience
There's
instead of, let's go try something different, right? So, getting them up here is one thing, but not just keeping them here, but, spreading the word about how positive experience there was. And I wonder if sometimes we have so much good here in the Kawartha Lakes. Should we be investing more as a city in our new economy, I'll call it, but our existing economy, our trails, our boat launches, our downtowns. And we've talked about the garbage in our downtowns and in our parks. And we can't do a whole lot about it this year because of where we are at this point of the year. But, moving forward from a council perspective, from a business perspective, if we invested more in our boat launches and had the best boat launches in Ontario, if we had a trail system like no other trail system for biking, hiking, and walking, whatever people want to do, if we really looked at our downtowns and, made it our goal to have spotless downtowns, whatever that takes, or if we looked at our parks and said, we're going to spend more time and money and effort on our parks to keep them clean, to keep them, we do what we can right now. It's not a reflection of staff because everybody's, working and doing their best with what we have, but we're always trying to find ways to cut. We need to cut people, we need to cut services, we need to cut the way we do business, and it doesn't always generate out as a good experience in the end for what it is. We're trying to cut on one end and we're trying to create something on the other end, and they don't always marry up. And I guess I've been thinking the last few weeks about what we've got here in the Kawartha Lakes, and when I read through your presentation, it was like, we've got people coming up here, and what if we as council or as a city or as a community just said, we don't need to reinvent anything from a tourism perspective, which I know is only part of our economy. But what if we made it a goal to invest more in our trails, to invest more in our boat launches, in our downtowns, in our parks, so that when people come up here, they leave and they go, wow, what an experience I just had. What an incredible community. How much fun was that? And half the marketing's being done for you because that positive word of mouth. But the other side of that equation is, if we're going to do that, there's a cost to that. And it goes back to my previous comment. If we're going to do that, what are we going to give up? What are we going to give up to do that? Because we can't keep adding on. And that's sometimes where the conversation stalls, because I've talked to people about it. That's a wonderful idea. Let's do that. That's a great idea. Let's do that next year. But, oh yeah, we got to pay for it. How do we do that? And nobody wants to give anything up. And that's where I struggle as, mayor or council, is just, trying to find that balance. I wonder if you have any comments on that, Tom.
Well, one of the things you very often run up against is, well, why are you giving money to them and not us? Or if you're cutting, let's cut the same amount across the board, like 5% across the board. That's crazy in a time like this. Like, you have to cut less in the areas that are going to promote economic growth, and cut more in the areas that are not going to promote economic growth. Clearly, the tourism thing, it's about customer relationship management, right? So these businesses need to follow up with people. The follow-up that's being done now is done online. You have to get these people's email addresses. You have to get feedback from them. What worked for them? What did they like? What didn't they like? That can help drive some of your investment. The other is, a lot of these small businesses either don't know how, or don't have time, or don't have the capacity right now to be able to develop these customer relationship management techniques that they haven't typically used before. I think it's worth considering for small and perhaps medium-sized businesses, for not-for-profits, to have a what I call a social platform, a center where, and on a subscription basis, let's say, or that's subsidized by the municipality, but the services that are required to run a small business are there. Bookkeeping is there. Telecommunications ability is there. Help with the technical side of computing, routers, internet, social media communications that they wouldn't have on their own. Marketing. All of those things that are central to the success of the small business community, which you have a lot of, but they can't do it. That's a good investment, I think, by a municipality to say, we will provide these kind of services. So you have people who are full-time people in social media that can help small businesses do their social media correctly. Or, you know, their legal contracts, or their negotiating loans, or anything like that, that you have experts in the field rather than that are available to them. And I think you could put together a collection of people from the local area with those kinds of skills that could come together and provide this platform that you could build small business on. That would be a really good investment, I think, a service investment.
Cool, thank you. Christina, go ahead.
Just further to that, Tom, I'm wondering if there would be some economies of scale with that social platform, if we could utilize some of those experts in the field, some of the experiences that we've already had, either with, you know, developing our own business units within the city, if we could use some of those expertise to help share that with our economy. And then further, if there are ways and means of not only delivering the same, perhaps not necessarily the same services with the same input required, are there ways and means for us to find efficiencies? Through this pandemic, we've been forced to do things a little differently. Both the mayor, CAO have been extremely supportive and please find other ways to do business. And I think that's a really important thing to capitalize on at this time, is that perhaps it's not always about cutting services, but it's about finding efficiencies to try to give some of the same services. But perhaps if we had some of these other items that you're mentioning, such as the social platform, perhaps some of those services we normally provide through customer service representation, et cetera, might better be served by some, you know, more structured expert pieces, so that we're not spending a lot of time just answering the same questions on the phone, but we're actually providing them with a service that leads them to something else. Sometimes our answers to our questions that we receive from the public and or from, you know, future business owners in our community, we don't necessarily have all the answers. We give them the laundry list of things they could do to get those answers, but it's not necessarily as productive. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about those efficiencies and economies of scale, and whether we absolutely have to just get rid of things, or if there's a ways and means that we can provide something to people. And then my last point is to continue to invite or encourage people to come to our community. Do we not have to have, I hate to say it because I know every brand out there does this, the new and improved version? Is there a ways and means for us to look at it? You mentioned earlier, scaling your business, scaling the opportunities. Is there ways and means of saying, you know, this year the city of Kawartha Lakes is going to focus on its trail system. By the way, did you know we have a 5-10-year plan of, and then the next year what we'll have to encourage you, or new or different, is, you know, Logie Street Park and another splash pad, or, you know, we have the, you know, we're going to look at an ice rink in, you know, Balsam Park. We're going to look at, and is there ways and means of trying to market that? Not just, this is all we offer today, but guess what? Did you know that the city of Kawartha Lakes is innovative, is working on efficiencies, and when every time we get more efficient in one service, we're offering yet another service, and then our investment lines up with that. Just some thoughts.
Well, I'm afraid that falls into the fallacy of composition. If you do one thing after another, they don't necessarily add up to a more attractive economy. There has to be some more concerted effort across the board to make this work. Obviously, everybody's looking for economies of scale. And I think the internet and the use of the internet is exactly all about that. If there are common questions, people more often than not go to FAQs now. That's economies of scale. You don't have to somebody answer the question, because the question comes up all the time, right? So you get that right. But and it's hard to believe that everybody talks about government becoming more productive. And everybody should be talking more about the private sector becoming more productive. It's hard to believe that the public sector across the world is unproductive with all the services that are provided. I don't, you know, there are ways to use the technology, get economies of scale, and in ways to improve productivity. But you need to find those areas that are doing it. I think providing expert services to people who don't have that available to them to help sustain and grow their business does have economies of scale in it for the public sector at first, That is, you can actually grow your economy with a little bit of investment. That's economies of scale. And then the businesses achieve economies of scale from that. So it's a partnership in it. But we have to find ways to use the technology, enable the small businesses to adapt and grow. And adapt and grow means they have to change the way they do business and use the technology to promote that, to promote their growth. They have to come together. You can't say, I'm going to change my business model, but I'm not going to use the technology. No, not going to work. Okay. Or you can say, I'm going to adapt the technology, going to use my old business systems. No, not going to work. It's got to be, here's the technology, here's the opportunity to change the way you do business. We'll support you in doing that, and we'll promote economic growth. And it will be more efficient. You can have experts involved instead of amateurs trying to figure out how to do customer relationship management.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Tom. Kathleen, go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. I absolutely agree. There's all sorts of programs that are offered everywhere and small incentives, but the businesses don't have time or the background in it. So, having a central hub would be amazing for the businesses, and they can pay us to eat little pieces. It doesn't work. And we're too busy, dealing with staffing issues and all the other things that go on with small businesses and have to be worrying about customer management systems and all of those other things. We're just trying to keep our head above water and get everyone paid. So I absolutely agree, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, go ahead. You had a question? Chris?
Yeah, sorry. I was just thinking that the Innovation Center is a sort of small version of what Tom's talking about, because they do provide those types of expertise to the businesses that they're helping along. And, in our case in Lindsay here, there's a small number of businesses, but they do all share. And I know in getting a tour of the Peterborough Innovation Center, they talked about having accountants come in and speak to the businesses. They had lawyers come in to talk about contracts and things. And they had, various expertise that would come in and work with the businesses that were part of the Innovation Center. And that Innovation Center also enabled the different businesses to interact with each other and help each other out. And so that whole kind of platform for enabling people to share resources is a great one, I think.
Great.
It is somewhat like the innovation cluster idea, but it's more day to day. And it can't be just the innovation cluster doing it. I mean, economic development needs to be involved. Community futures needs to be involved. Your professional, accountants and lawyers and all of that need to be involved somehow to put together this robust set of skills. IT people, stuff like that, marketing people. But we need to be able to pull that together all in one place. And it is being done. Actually, a student at Trent who's now doing a PhD in this at Guelph in rural contexts around social platforms, particularly for not-for-profits. Her name's Katie Allen, a Peterborough native, is doing really good work in this field. And it's not completely new. It's been done, but I think it's worth looking at as a public investment in the development, in the transformation of small business.
Great. Any further? Thanks. Great discussion, folks. Any final questions, comments? We'll move on. We got a few other things. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you. Just to round that out, the concept of incubation centers of some kind have been, as Tom said, has been around for a really long time. And in a lot of rural communities, they have not worked very well. But talking about creative destruction and the introduction of technology, when it doesn't have to be in a physical location, which is typically what they've been, I think that it actually opens up a discussion to be had, because technology enables those sorts of services to take place in a different format that might work in rural communities.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that overview and presentation. Good discussion. Hopefully we'll all keep that in the back of our minds, or in the front of our minds, I guess, as we try to navigate ahead. Appreciate that very much. So we'll move down to item 6, which is infrastructure stimulus. We had last week, I hope you still have it, wasn't included in your agenda this week, but shovel-ready design projects. And I just wanted to, Christina's here from engineering, so if there's any questions, it's really just, what I'm looking for is for this group to make a bit of a recommendation to council on just what they feel would be, from an economic recovery, what would be the highlighted capital projects that we could possibly recommend for budget approval next year. A lot of these are here, they're ready, they're design ready, they're shovel ready. We have, when you talk about Elise Street and Murray Street in Fenelon Falls, water main and road construction. We have the downtown Lindsay project, phase 3 is scheduled for next year. We have the Fenelon Falls downtown is scheduled for the near future, hopefully next year. There's budget amounts, obviously, that have to be considered. There's only so much money each year to do it. And I don't know if you all still have that piece of paper in front of you, but I'm just looking for, some kind of motion or recommendation from this group on what they feel would be, out of these capital projects for next year, what would be their recommendation from an economic recovery perspective to get the biggest bang for the buck, I guess. And, I think we've talked about it before when we talk about investing in our downtowns is a great way for our economy in a lot of different ways to recover. The Lindsay Street phase 3 is scheduled for next year. It's about $6.5 million. Is that amount for next year? That's beautification, the road, sewer, water main construction, streetscaping, and so on. That would entail the rest of the downtown. And then for stage 4 the year after would be some of the side streets, just to wrap those up. So, and then, the other one that jumps to mind for me is the Fenelon Falls downtown, which is been on, the design is ready. Road, sewer, water main construction, streetscape beautification, much like Lindsay, a little bit of a lesser scale. It's ready to go. It's about $2.7 million. Probably wouldn't start next year till after Labor Day, after their summer season, because they only have one main street. But I'm wondering what the committee thinks about, from a priority and all these different road projects and streetscape projects, water main construction. Do you guys agree that these downtown projects, I'm not saying none of the other ones would get done, but that these downtown revitalization projects should be a priority from an economic recovery perspective? Is there any questions, comments? Don't care. Councillor Vail, anything? What do you think? Comment, question?
That's what I was looking at before. I think the downtowns have to be a priority, right, on that. I think we have to be looking at projects, to Tom's point and Rebecca's point, that's going to drive future growth, right? Not that the other infrastructure projects aren't important, because they need to be done, like bridges and stuff too. But at this point in time, we need to drive some stuff that's going to drive business.
Okay, thank you. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just was to add to that, I agree. I think the priority should be on the downtown revitalization projects. I think the other infrastructure projects, although they're important and need to be completed, I don't see them having a near-term economic impact. The other thing I just think that it ties in nicely is if we're trying to promote the idea of the digital Main Street and creating more of a destination for people to come to, if there's going to be more opportunities for online shopping, I think bringing people to having a reason for people to come to the downtown core and check it out, because it's it's an attractive place to hang out, or for people to, that's maybe the wrong word, for people to come and visit. I think that I hope that will help to increase some of that digital e-commerce for some of those retailers downtown.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Pat O'Reilly, go ahead.
No, just echo some of the same words. I think as Andrew and Mark, I think it's very important that we prioritize our downtowns. Not that these other aren't worthwhile projects, and we're going to get them done. We're going to get to them, but I think in light of the economy that we're facing and going forward, that's important that we get these projects underway.
Tom, just based on our discussion, is the downtown you feel is a bigger bang for the buck when we're talking about from an economic recovery perspective? Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes. Yeah, intensification of downtowns is important, I think. And I think people will know, if in the tourism world, people are going to end up downtown likely at some point, go for dinner, something like that. If it's a shabby downtown and it isn't up to speed, I think there's a marketing element to this too. The downtown is revitalizing. It's an indication of revitalization across the community. I'm all for a downtown intensification of small towns in Ontario. I think Peterborough has a lot of work to do still, but it's still a relatively vibrant downtown. So, but I'm all in favor of those investments.
Awesome, thank you. So would this committee entertain a motion that we recommend to council the prioritize the downtown Lindsay Phase 3 and the Fenland downtown reconstruction be prioritized, be priority projects for budget consideration in 2021? It's just a recommendation to council, but I think from an economic recovery perspective, it would carry some weight from this committee. Mark, would you make that motion going forward? Moved by Mark.
Right, yeah, I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Mark. Andrew, Councillor Vail, would you second that? Okay. Again, just a recommendation to council, and I want to, some of these budgets, this doesn't utilize the whole budget in some of these areas, so there'll be other projects included as well, but I think it's important that we just prioritize it from our opinion, from an economic recovery perspective. Any other questions on that motion? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, we mentioned Lindsay and Fenland, I believe on the list of shovel-ready projects. Was there something in Omimi as well that was listed?
Yeah, the Omimi downtown is we're working on the design on that right now. We got some money from the province to do the design. It's not as far ahead as Fenland Falls is. Fenland Falls is ready to go. Obviously, Lindsay, we're in the middle of it. Omimi would certainly be next. What's it called? Connecting Links is a program with the province. Because it's on a provincial highway, we apply for money from the province every year to revitalize the downtown in Omimi. We got money this year to do the design for Connecting Links, and we're hopeful that leads to money for next year or the year after to actually do the construction work in the downtown. So we're heading on the right direction on that one. I don't think we have in the budget right now to do all 3 downtowns in 1 year, but as we get some grant money from the province, then Omimi would be the next priority on the list. So I think if we, good comment, but I think if we stick with the 2 right now, Mark, knowing that Omimi is next in line, then we'll be good to go.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, we'll consider the motion passed, and I'll put that in a memo and bring that forward to council as a recommendation. Thank you. I know Chris has to go at 11:30, so let's move down to item 7.1, which is the rural zoning bylaw consolidation. I know, I think Richard Hawley's with us. We were asked for just if there's any action available to regarding that consolidation bylaw. We all agree is important. Is there any way to speed it up? Maybe you can just give us a quick overview, Richard, on where we are. And Chris, I know your time is limited, but if you want to jump in, just go ahead. Go ahead, Richard.
Great, thanks everyone. So we just to give a quick background, Councillor Vail is the head of the task force. So there's a task force that's been established for the rural zoning bylaw consolidation. It's looking at 13 rural zoning bylaws to consolidate them into a single rural zoning bylaw. The work really started last summer. We had a series of open houses that were very well attended. We had a lot of really good discussions that generated that sort of really feed into a lot of the issues that have been sort of put together in an issues paper. A number of different documents have been prepared. So we have a discussion paper that was finalized by the task force. There is an assessment of key issues and methodology report that's currently under review. And had COVID not happened, it would have gone forward to the task force for review. We had also planned on doing a couple of sort of key sessions on some of the key issues. So what's come out of the discussion is really there's sort of two sort of key areas that we wanted to focus on. One was sort of agricultural, and the other was waterfront. We see those as sort of some of the two key areas that we feel we need to do a little bit more work on. We were hoping to do some specialized focus groups on those two areas. But those have been sort of bumped to the late summer, early fall. And obviously with COVID, we've really had to sit down and rethink the zoning bylaw. So we're going to be relying a lot for future consultation on teleconference meetings, obviously. And our consultant has a number of ideas in terms of public engagement. So having sort of virtual town hall meetings, they have had some success with those on other projects that they're working on. We've also had some discussion with our consultants on sort of the timeline. They have looked at, so essentially we've probably lost about 5 months. And they have looked at the timeline for all the work that still needs to be done. They feel that they can stick with the existing timeline, which is basically sort of October, November of 2021, to bring a final bylaw to council for adoption. Some of the things that sort of still need to happen prior to that is we still need to have the preparation of the first zoning bylaw. That still needs to be done. I know they are starting to work on some of that work, but the first draft zoning bylaw still needs to be prepared. And we had also planned on different levels of public consultation throughout there. So we had sort of looked at 3 different times for preparing the zoning bylaw for public review and obviously agency review as well. So and as well having technical advisory committee meetings and task force meetings in there as well. They feel that if we try to compress it any further, we're going to be losing different touch points for the public to have access and have consultation. It's also going to create too much of a time crunch for different review points. But they do feel that we can keep that original time frame in place. There is time within the sort of the overall time budget, and we do have a revised sort of Gantt chart and timetable for that. So we can share that with you if you would like to see that those 2 options. We can definitely share that with you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I know we were talking about, is there, it's important. Is there any way to speed it up? But we want to do it properly. We need the public consultation. So I guess because of the lost time, they are speeding it up to stick with the original timeline is really, they're going to accelerate to meet that original timeline, accounting for the fact that we lost 4 or 5 months with the pandemic. Is that basically accurate?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Any questions, comments for Richard? Thanks for that, Richard. That brings us up to date. Chris, did you have anything to add to that, or no? Nope, you're good. Okay. All right. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate that. Let's move down to item 7.2, the development working group. We're going to get an update from Bjorn Alfredson, who's been working with some of our staff, and Brenda on a bit of an update on the development process. So I don't think he's looking for anything from the group as of yet, but we'll get an update from him. We'll see if there's any questions. Go ahead, Bjorn.
Thank you. Our meeting was on Thursday, July 23rd, and we were only marginally more successful than the task group or task force meeting on the Tuesday. Zoom wasn't working properly and we were cut short. We did all have time to agree that it would be handy to have information at our fingertips in regards to what applications are in the pipeline and what stage they're at. We also had time to agree that the concierge style approach is promising, and it could be a good bridge between the economic development and the planning department, and maybe in time between the public and the planning department. Step one in this case would be a shared file with this basic information. I had suggested a database approach as in the document I shared with the task force before last meeting. Richard and Chris felt that it might be better to start with a spreadsheet approach. There's pros and cons with both, and I don't think it really matters as long as it provides the information that we need. Chris sent a letter the next day, or an email, to his staff asking them to look into creating some kind of spreadsheet. But both Chris and Richard were on holidays for the last 2 weeks. So I didn't want to bother them on their holidays to see how that was going. But in my opinion, there is no reason at all to make this first step very complicated at all. Just a list of applications and what stage they're at, and in a format that's accessible to other planners and other city departments and councillors. We talked a little bit about the City Works program, and that is apparently a very complicated beast. I was told at that meeting that the city's IT department had spent over 1,000 hours customizing that program for our specific planning department. And the bottom line is that the program is not being used right now. Didn't get a really good handle on why. What I sort of heard was that it was maybe a little cumbersome and time consuming. They didn't have time to keep it up to date. I'm a little bit confused because I also saw a report from the planning department to city council from, I think it was February of 2018, where they talked about how this City Works program had gone live on June 22nd, I think it was 2017, like 8 months before the report. So I'm not sure if it was used at all, to what extent it's being used, but I don't think that is the main issue now. I say we keep it simple. Like Tom Phillips said, forget perfect. We start with something where we get the information of what applications are in, what stage are they at, and gradually build on to seeing how much time we invest on each of these applications and where we could perhaps improve the process going forward. The other thing I want to comment on is the discussion on what the municipality can do to help economic development. What should the priorities be and what can be done? My experience from dealing around the world is that the countries where the governments have the greatest ability to influence the economy is worse than where the governments, like strong democracies like, UK, Canada, US, where the government has limited ability to interfere in the economy is a lot stronger. Whereas in, China, Russia, they can claim some successes economically, but the average person does not have much of a life in those places. So I think we have to be a little bit careful. I think that the best thing we can do for the economy is to remove barriers, make it easier and slicker for businesses to grow on their own. And that's the approach I'd like to take with the planning department too. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the update. I don't know if Richard, if you have any comment on the City Works or some of the confusion around that, or the spreadsheet versus the database approach, but it sounds like you're kind of working together on it. And now that everybody's back, we can, you guys can keep communicating. And I think, well, I'll ask that question first. Go ahead, Richard.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we are using City Works for some functions, not for all. There are some time constraints that we're facing in terms of keeping everything current and populating everything. So that's part of the challenge. One thing that is good for that City Works has been very successful at is tracking tracking calls and information related to specific properties. That it has been extremely useful for that, because we put all of the inquiries into it. And so if we get multiple inquiries on one property, the planner can simply pull that up and say, by the way, you know, so somebody else called and this is the information that we given them. So it's helping us with consistent answers on a lot of inquiries. So that is helpful. But it is a pretty large program in terms of loading data into it, for example, on development applications and sort of dealing with everything. So it is not being utilized to its full ability. Yes, Bjorn's correct that Chris sent out an email, and we do have a spreadsheet in SharePoint that we are looking at. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Just came back from vacation, but we will be looking at that. And I don't know if Chris wants to speak to that about sharing it, but obviously we'll take a look at it first, start to populate it, and then we can certainly share it with the group.
Yeah, and if nothing else, Richard, I would suggest, and you can clear it with Chris, that, you know, certainly share it with Bjorn so that, you know, he's had some of these database spreadsheets put together before for business. So if there's a way you can share it, and as you're sort of trying to fine tune it, I think he should be part of that discussion. So maybe you can run that by Chris and see if you can share that with Bjorn as you're moving forward. Rebecca, did you have any comments on thank you, Richard. Any comments on the concierge approach, the tie-in with economic development? I mean, is that a discussion that you've had with Bjorn at this point, or as part of the group, or something that you're sort of working on in the future?
We've had preliminary discussions on the concierge program, but it will be a future discussion with Bjorn and Mark and the internal team. Okay. I've talked to quite a few people about it, and the feedback I've got from businesses and developers across the city is that they love the concept of the idea. How it would roll out would be a different story. But Bjorn, I wonder if you could just update us on what you see as next steps.
Yeah, I would like to comment on the concierge by saying that I think everybody agrees it's a great idea. We don't quite know how it would work or how we can make it work the best. So my next step would be to perhaps have a temporary concierge, maybe somebody from the economic development department who takes on that and also sits in and looks at the spreadsheet that we're trying to create with up-to-date information, so that they would be comfortable with using it. And maybe in the next couple of weeks, it shouldn't take more than a couple hours to put a spreadsheet together. I think Anna Kalnina was the name of the person who put the first one together. If you get somebody from the economic development to be concierge, I don't think the concierge should be somebody from the planning department. I don't think they have any extra manpower to spare. But if for the next couple of weeks to see how that's working, I'd love to be a part of it. If people think I can help, if you guys are working it out all on your own, that's fine too.
Okay, what do you see as next steps, Bjorn, for the next meeting? What do you see as?
I think that the planning department should start using this very, very basic spreadsheet so we can, by the next meeting, see what applications are in the pipeline, what stage are they at, and have this temporary concierge report back and say, hey, it's working. I think I have the information I need without having to bug planners if somebody's calling in.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll try to get that done. Any questions for Bjorn? Any comments, questions? Seeing none, thank you, Bjorn, for that update. Appreciate the work and everybody you're working with. We'll move down to our last report is marketing programs by Rebecca. Everybody was sent out a report to be received with some update. I don't think we have to go through. It looks like a great campaign moving forward. We don't have to go through the whole report, but do you want to give us a quick 2-minute summary, Rebecca, and then we'll see if there's any questions?
Sure, yes. So as we've talked about before, there are 2 campaigns. One, the tourism campaign, the summer campaign has launched. It's out there. We're directing everybody through a series of ads that's all over social media at the moment to come up to Kawartha Lakes. The images are all about our beautiful environment, being outside. They are carefully chosen images so that they're COVID relevant, and the messaging is talking about finding your summer in Kawartha Lakes. To date, so far, we've seen a huge uptake in the number of click-throughs from those ads into our tourism website. So just to say that this morning, users to the website as a whole were up 148% over last year, and our unique users to the website is up 155%. And we're seeing a lot of people going to our landing page, going back to our home page, going to our attractions and our trails pages. So far that summer tourism campaign looks like it's hitting the mark. With a focus, our focus is shifting after we build off this summer one to a fall campaign and a winter campaign to keep as many returning visitors to our community within those months. And then the second campaign, which is included in the report, is
We keep losing you, Rebecca. We're losing you, Rebecca. You're frozen up on us. Can you reset something on your end? Yes, we need better broadband. We know that's a priority. Thank you for reminding us. We had it earlier, Kathleen, when you were cutting out when you were talking, and the same thing. So it's a gentle reminder that we all know what our number one priority is. Stop reminding me. Thank you. But we've lost Rebecca. So is there? She's frozen up on. Oh, there she is. She's back. Go ahead. We just lost you there for a minute, Rebecca.
Sorry. So I don't know where I lost you. The tourism campaign, the summer campaign is doing really well. We're heading into the fall and the winter campaigns. They're typically our slower seasons. So looking for really strong campaigns there to keep people coming back up. And the Shop Local campaign is in its final stages of development, and we've got meetings coming up with our chambers of commerce around implementation for that.
Awesome, thank you. Are there any questions for Rebecca on the marketing development, marketing updates report that everybody had a chance to go through? Any comments, questions? Jill, you like the direction? Yep. Anybody else? No questions? So are you okay, Rebecca, if I include that report when I take a memo to council on September 1st to committee of the whole with that recommendation for infrastructure projects? Are you okay if I include that report just so all of council sees it? Is that okay? Yeah. And Tom, are you okay if I include your presentation? I would like all of council to see that as well as part of the memo, just for information, if no objections. Okay.
Oh, fine. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. We're going to make you famous or infamous maybe by the time we're done with you. Okay, so that's our basic agenda with the marketing program. So thank you for that, Rebecca. Is there any final questions? We're just a little bit. What are we doing here for time? We're pretty good. Are there any final questions or comments before we adjourn? And we'll set our next meeting for September 1st at 10 a.m. I know that's committee of the whole day, but I think it works 3 weeks, gives everybody time to work on a few things. Are there any final questions, comments from anybody that they want to add or haven't had a chance to? Go ahead, Pat.
I mentioned to you earlier about a letter coming from the Lindsay Legacy Chess Fund. I don't know if that's appropriate to discuss it at this point, or we'll just wait till the next meeting.
I think we'll wait till the letter comes, and then once we have the letter in front of us, Pat, we can have a discussion about it.
Thank you.
That works. Anyone else? Okay, then we'll adjourn, and the next meeting date is September 1st at 10 a.m. If that's okay, we'll try to stay away from Labor Day weekend. Everybody, thank you for your contributions today and for participating, and we'll be in touch. We've got some homework, so we'll get at it, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.